A lone stick figure sits before a flickering bonfire, its flames dancing like unspoken fury. He watches the sparks rise, wondering how so small a spark could ignite such a consuming blaze. In his chest, a familiar heat stirs anger, born from unmet expectations and old wounds. The Buddha taught, hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by non-hatred. Ask yourself, when did a single ember of irritation become the wildfire of your wrath? He remembers the first time anger flared like a sudden storm breaking a clear sky. Words he thought were gentle became sharp arrows, wounding both speaker and listener. Yet the sting of regret came only after the heat cooled, leaving charred memories in its wake. The Dhammapada advises, he who controls anger as a charioteer controls his steeds, gains mastery over his senses. Consider, how often do you look back on words unleashed in fury, wishing you could rein them in before they flew? He recalls the last time anger seized him in a meeting, his jaw clenched, words barreling out before thought could intervene. The room fell silent, heavy with the fallout of his outburst as colleagues recoiled. In that hush, he felt a hollow ache, realizing that anger had isolated him more than any disagreement ever could. The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 meaningless words is one meaningful word, spoken at the right time. Reflect. Could one pause, one mindful breath, have spared you that moment of regret? Later that evening, he stood before his own mirror reflection eyes, blazing with the echo of unspoken hurts. In that still glass, he saw both victim and victimizer entwined within his rage. The Buddha's wisdom echoed softly, what you are, you become, and what you feel, you attract. Ask yourself, when anger mirrors back, whose face do you truly see, yours or your wound? On a crowded street, he felt his chest tighten as a stranger's careless shove ignited a familiar blaze. His mind replayed every perceived slight each, a spark in a tinderbox. He clenched his fists, breath coming shallow, until a memory surfaced. The monk who paused mid-anger and placed a hand over his heart. In that moment of compassion, the heat cooled and clarity returned. The Buddha counseled anger, born of anger soon dies away, but anger born of love never dies. Consider, what if the next time fury flares, you pause and place your hand on your heart, would the fire subside? He retreated to a quiet garden, where a single lotus bloomed amidst muddy waters. The flower's grace and filth struck him as a metaphor for his own mind, capable of beauty even when rooted in pain. He knelt and inhaled its fragrance, feeling anger's grip loosen like old vines. The Buddha observed, just as the lotus rises untainted, so can the mind emerge free of Ask yourself, if your anger were mud, what lotus might you cultivate to rise above it? Under the glow of a restless moon, he sat on cool stone and traced the patterns of lichen growing in cracks. Over time, the living green had overtaken the cold grey. He saw in that persistence a lesson. Small, steady compassion can crack the hardest hearts. The Buddha taught, conquer anger with non-anger. Conquer evil with good. Reflect, which tender act, however humbled, could you plant tonight to break the cycle of fury? He remembered his teacher's voice. Anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other to perish. He envisioned the corrosive venom spreading in his veins. Shuddering, he drew a deep breath, watching the poison dissolve in the salt water of tears and compassion. The Buddha said, he who forgives conquers his greatest enemy. Ask yourself, what grudges are you nursing as a tragic tonic? Who might you set free by forgiving? A village elder had once gifted him a battered clay bowl, saying, a cracked vessel can still hold healing broth. In that broken gift, he found humility in imperfection and, saw his own anger as a cracked vessel ready for repair. He filled it with warm soup, the steam rising in gentle spirals of acceptance. The Buddha taught, there is no fear for one whose mind is not filled with desires. Consider, how might you pour compassion into your broken places until they hold peace? He recalled a tale of a bamboo grove that swayed but never snapped in the fiercest wind. Anger, like a gale, tests our resilience. He bent with each gust of frustration, grounding his stance, yet staying supple. The Buddha counseled softness, overcome hardness. Reflect, in the storms of your anger, could you learn to bend rather than break? At dawn, he watched the sun's first rays ignite the dewy field in golden light. Even the coldest night had yielded to warmth. He realized anger too is a night temporary and destined to give way if he simply let it be. The Buddha taught, all conditioned things are impermanent. Ask yourself, how might the sunrise of awareness dissolve your midnight rage? He carried a heavy stone in his pocket, unseen but weighing him down at every step. Finally, he paused by a stream, peeled back his coat, and let the stone slip into the water's flow. He watched it sink, feeling his burden lift. The Buddha counseled, let go of all grudges. Reflect, what hidden stones do you drag waiting only for the courage to release? In the marketplace, bartering voices rose in chaos. Anger can amplify like competing shouts until nothing is heard but noise. He stepped back, closed his eyes, and listened to his breath instead. The Buddha said, guard your mind like one protecting a treasure. Consider, when the world clamors, will you defend your calm by turning inward? He observed a teacher blow out a single candle in a dark hall. In that breath of emptiness, the scent of burnt wick lingered, a reminder that endings contain beginnings. The Buddha taught, in the cessation of suffering lies peace. Ask yourself, what small flame might you extinguish today to breathe in fresh possibility? He recalled his own reflection, eyes red from tears born of anger and shame. He wiped them away, then softly spoke loving kindness to himself. May I be safe, may I be free. The Buddha taught metta, radiate loving kindness to all. Reflect, could self-compassion be the salve you need when fury stings? On a mountain trail, each step required mindful balance. A single slip could send stones tumbling. Anger, unchecked, is that slip pulling everything downhill. He planted his foot firmly, feeling Earth's steadiness beneath. The Buddha advised, step with mindfulness. Consider, when anger trips you, how might you reground in the present? He encountered a bell hung in the breeze, its tone clear yet gentle. Anger can clang like a metal gong, harsh and jarring. He reached out and gave the bell a soft tap, listening as the ringing faded into silence. The Buddha taught, from the mind's own self come wickedness and also unselfishness. Ask, how will you strike your mind's bell harshly or with gentle care? A thorn pricked his finger as he reached for a rose. He winced, instinctively yanking his hand back, but then gently pressed a leaf to the wound. In care, pain softened. The Buddha said, suffering is optional. Reflect, when anger pricks you, will you nurse the wound or recoil in pain? He watched an archer draw back an arrow, tension building until release. Anger tightens the heart like drawn bowstring ready to snap. He exhaled, letting the arrow go, and felt tension pour out. The Buddha taught, even the gods envy those who overcome anger. Ask yourself, what arrows of resentment might you release today? He sat by an oak's gnarled roots, tracing their ancient patterns, learning that growth withstands harsh seasons. Anger, like winter, can stunt growth when it lingers. He pressed his palm to the bark, feeling resilience flow upward. The Buddha taught, patience is the highest form of asceticism. Consider how might patient endurance transform your own inner winter. He came across a wilted flower trampled in the dirt, its petals broken, its beauty dismissed by careless footsteps. For a moment, he felt anger rise at the thoughtlessness of those who pass without seeing. But then he knelt, cleared the soil gently, and gave the flower a drop of water. In that moment, he understood. Anger reacts, but compassion repairs. The Buddha taught, if you light a lamp for someone else, it will also brighten your path. Reflect, do you pour your energy into resentment or into quiet acts of healing? He sat among others, all wrapped in their own storms, each angry for different reasons, each believing their fire was justified. And he realized anger isolates not because others are distant, but because it narrows the world to only the self. The Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Ask yourself, what if the person you're trying to hurt through your anger is still you? He entered a room where two friends were locked in a shouting match. He saw the veins in their necks, the clenched fists, the words sharp as blades. But more than that, he saw fear, each one terrified of not being heard, of being misunderstood. Anger is often a scream of the unheard heart. The Buddha reminded, speak only if it improves upon the silence. Reflect, is your anger truly about the other person or the ache of being unseen? He was once told that anger is a fire that cannot distinguish between the enemy and the vessel that holds it. He remembered this as he slammed a door, feeling the wood tremble beneath his palm. But the trembling echoed in his chest too. The Buddha said, one moment of patience may ward off great disaster. One moment of impatience may ruin a whole life. Consider, what doors have you slammed, not just outside you but within? He once saw a dog barking wildly at its reflection in a pond, convinced that the image was a threat. But when the water stilled, the barking stopped. Anger can be like that, reacting not to others, but to distorted reflections of our own fear. The Buddha taught, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Ask, are you angry at what's before you, or only at your own reflection in troubled water? He walked into a temple and saw an old monk sweeping fallen leaves. Why sweep if they will return tomorrow? He asked. The monk smiled, because it is not the leaves I'm sweeping, but the anger they represent. In each slow stroke, he released what no longer served. The Buddha taught, to conquer oneself is a greater task than conquering others. Reflect, what leaves of resentment will you sweep today, knowing they may return? A story he once read lingered. A man struck by an arrow cursed the world while refusing to remove it, demanding to know who shot it and why. All the while, the poison spread. The Buddha said, you were shot with an arrow. Do not waste time questioning who did it. Remove it before the poison kills you. Ask yourself, are you seeking justice or delaying healing? On a hot day, he carried a pot of water across the field, spilling it with every angry step. By the time he arrived, it was nearly empty. In that moment, he realized how anger leaks the good from our hearts, leaving us dry when we most need nourishment. The Buddha taught, just as rain cannot penetrate a house with a well-thatched roof, so anger cannot enter a well-guarded mind. Consider, how much peace are you spilling on your way to nowhere? He sat beside an old tree whose branches had broken in storms, yet still reached upward. He traced the scars in its bark, reminders that life wounds us, but growth is still possible. Anger often masks old injuries, flaring up whenever they're touched. The Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. Ask, what pain hides beneath your angers? Barkand, what might it become if nurtured with understanding? He dreamed of shouting in an empty room, his voice echoing back only louder. When he woke, his throat was dry, but his heart clearer. Sometimes, the only one we're arguing with is ourselves. The Buddha said, the foolish man who recognizes his own ignorance is wise to that extent. Reflect, what if your anger was never about others, but about the parts of yourself you've yet to embrace? In a dusty drawer, he found an old letter he had never sent words, soaked in anger, carefully composed, but never delivered. As he read it now, years later, the emotions felt foreign. The rage that once felt righteous now seemed immature, unnecessary. He smiled faintly, folded the letter, and tossed it into the fire. The Buddha taught, the past is already gone, the future is not yet here. There's only one moment for you to live. Reflect, how many unsent words still hold power over you? At a riverbank, he watched a boatman struggle upstream, paddling furiously against the current. It reminded him of how he often resisted his emotions, fighting anger with more force. But then he saw another boat simply drifting, gently guided by the river's flow. The Buddha said, let go or be dragged. Ask, are you paddling against anger, or are you learning to let it pass? In the middle of a crowded square, he saw a street performer juggling flames carefully, skillfully, but one mistake away from being burned. Anger can be like that, impressive to control, but dangerous to hold. He remembered the Buddha's words, there is no fire like passion, no crime like hatred. Consider, are you juggling your anger to impress, or are you ready to put it down before it burns you? He met a child crying over a broken toy. The boy's face was red with frustration, fists clenched, voice trembling. Kneeling beside him, he gently whispered, it's okay to be upset. The child softened instantly, tears turning quiet. He realized no one had ever said that to him when he was angry. The Buddha said, understanding is the heart of compassion. Ask, when was the last time someone understood your anger instead of judging it? During meditation, he observed a single thought arise, then another, all tinged with resentment. He saw how the mind clings to pain like a tongue to a sore tooth. But by watching without reacting, the thoughts lost their heat. The Buddha taught, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Reflect, are your angry thoughts driving you, or are you simply watching them pass like clouds? He recalled a vase he had broken in a moment of rage. Later, he glued it back together, line by line, though its cracks remained visible. But in those cracks, gold paint shimmered, a reminder of how even broken things can be made more beautiful. The Buddha taught, with our thoughts, we make the world. Consider, what have you broken in anger, and how might you rebuild it, not to hide the scars, but to honor the healing. He passed a bird trapped in a net, flapping wildly. He knelt to free it, hands moving slowly so as not to startle. Anger, too, needs this kind of carapace, gently, not forced away. The Buddha said, delight in heedfulness. Guard your thoughts well. Ask, do you fight your anger violently or untangle it with patient kindness? He once barked at a friend who was late, only to learn later they were grieving. Anger had blinded him to compassion. Now, he wonders how often we judge without seeing the pain behind someone's silence. The Buddha reminded, you will not be punished for your anger, but by your anger. Reflect, what truths might you uncover if you paused before reacting? On a cold night, he lit a fire to warm himself. Too close, and the heat stung. Too far, and the cold crept in. Anger is like that, needing space. needing mindfulness, or it either burns or leaves you frozen. The Buddha taught, balance is the key to all. Ask, are you sitting in the right distance from your emotions? He heard an old monk say, anger isn't the enemy. It's a signal, a voice crying out for attention. Since then, he's learned to sit with it, asking gently, what are you trying to protect? And often, the answer was pain. The Buddha said, to understand everything is to forgive everything. Reflect, when anger speaks, are you listening with curiosity or reacting with fear? He stood in line at a cafe, waiting patiently until someone cut in front. Instinctively, he opened his mouth to protest, but then noticed the person's trembling hands and tired eyes. Compassion replaced judgment. The Buddha taught hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule. Ask yourself, how often do you mistake pain for rudeness and react without seeing? He watched an ant carry a crumb 10 times its size. A breeze knocked it over, and yet it returned to the task, undeterred. No rage, no blame, only quiet persistence. Anger, he realized, is a luxury nature does not afford. The Buddha said, drop by drop, the water pot is filled. Reflect, what could you achieve if you channeled your energy into patience instead of fury? He found himself venting to a friend, voice rising, breath shortening, heart racing. The friend said nothing, only placed a warm hand on his shoulder. No advice, no judgment, just presence. And slowly, the storm subsided. The Buddha taught, silence is an answer to. Ask, what if the cure for anger is not words, but someone willing to simply be there? He stared at a candle's flame flickering in the wind. Sometimes tall, sometimes low, but always anchored to the wick. The breath of anger may shake you, but your awareness is the wick. Stay grounded, the Buddha reminded. A disciplined mind brings happiness. Reflect, are you the flame or the steady wick holding it? On a train, a child kicked the back of his seat endlessly. He turned, ready to scold until he saw the child's mother, eyes full of apology and exhaustion. He took a deep breath and turned back around. That moment felt like a quiet victory. The Buddha taught, the strongest among us is the one who controls his anger. Ask, what battles do you win by choosing not to fight? He remembered how anger had once fractured a friendship, sharp words flung like arrows, impossible to retrieve. Years later, silence filled the space where laughter once lived. Regret teaches what anger hides. The Buddha said, speak only what is true, spoken in kindness, spoken at the right time. Reflect, what words do you wish you had swallowed instead of releasing? He stumbled upon a stone Buddha statue, serene despite the elements moss-covered, cracked, yet smiling. He wondered, could he, too, remain centered no matter what weathered him? The Buddha within the statue seemed to whisper, peace is not in the world around you, it begins with you. Ask yourself, what part of you remains still, no matter the storm? In the evening, he watched ripples spread across a still pond from a single tossed pebble. He thought about how his anger spreads the same way unseen, but touching everything. The Buddha said, everything is interconnected. When one thing changes, everything changes. Consider, what kind of ripples are you leaving in the hearts of others? He closed his eyes and imagined every person who had ever wronged him. One by one, he forgave them not because they asked, but because he no longer wished to carry them. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's refusing to live shackled to old fires. The Buddha taught, forgive others, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Ask what weight might lift if you chose to forgive today. And at last, he understood. Anger is not the enemy, is the teacher. It points to wounds unhealed, expectations unmet, boundaries crossed. When held with awareness, it reveals where love is needed most. The Buddha taught, in the end, only three things matter: how well you lived, how gently you loved, and how gracefully you let go. Reflect. Are you ready to listen to what your anger is trying to teach?